So today we've got a full room, as you can see, of RCA researchers joining us, and a very robust group of researchers from the center on the screen as well. And we do have, I believe, 5 speakers today. So we're going to have to work through in a very time-efficient manner. And Graham has volunteered to be our kind of 1-minute warning in terms of the presentation times. So if he kind of, he's drawing a card at the moment, so everything's visual in this place. So he'll be giving, I think, a 2-minute warning and a 1-minute warning just to make sure everybody's on track. I have, just so speakers don't panic, I have built in a little bit of space. We've got a break time between the first set of 3 speakers and the last set of 2 speakers before the Q&A. We've got another break as well. So there's a little bit of wiggle room in case people run over, but it would be appreciative if everybody stuck to time as part of our professional practice and courtesy to all the speakers and those of us in the audience as well. So I'm not going to say much more. I think everybody knows everybody. I think it's pretty much the same group as we had last week. So I won't go through. Bill. Yes.
So can I ask, just because there is someone new I know, someone called Victoria Brannigan, who is a PhD student here, and I wonder if we could just acknowledge that and just say hi to Victoria. If she wants to introduce herself, that would be great.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry, Victoria. Yeah, no sorry, problem. The screen is just as chaotic as the room.
That's why I thought I'd mention it.
No, thank you. Oh. Yeah, Victoria, go ahead.
Thank you. It's great to be joining you. I'm doing a PhD with Del Olson and Sarah Wright in poetic practice. So they prompted me to be joined to this group, and so I'm really interested to see what everyone's research is and be a part of it.
Great, thank you, Victoria. I'm wondering, should we go around and just if everybody introduce themselves again? What do you think, James?
Well, with 5 speakers to come, I don't want us to sort of be caught for time. I mean, we are basically the same group. A couple of colleagues and students from last week can't make it, including Sarah, in fact, and they have apologized to me, and I'm sharing that. But we are pretty much the same. So I think we could go straight in if you're all ready your end.
Yeah, great. So Victoria, I was going to say, if anybody is of interest in terms of their research and you want to follow up, then James and I were really good last week of passing names around and making connections between the 2 groups. So that's for anybody that wants to kind of reconnect after they've heard this presentation or want to know more about research that you might be able to share as well. So that opportunity is there. Okay, so we'll go ahead and begin. And our running order at the moment is Rowena, Sean, and Tess. And then we'll take a little bit of a break. And then Juice and Archana, a little bit of a break. And then we've got our Q&A discussion session. So as I said, you've got 10 to 15 minutes. Graham will give us the call when you're getting close to time. But otherwise, enjoy the presentation and have your questions ready. Please feel free to put those in the chat as we're going along so you don't forget what you want to ask. And then we can pull all those together during the Q&A. That's Rowena getting prepared. Yeah, so please put them in the chat as things arise in your mind that you want to follow up with questions or comments during the Q&A session as well. So, Rowena, are you ready to start?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I'll share my screen.
Yep, it's yours. Thank you.
Just want to check if everybody can see my screen.
Yep. Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and start, and please warn me for 1 minute because I feel like I prepared too much for this presentation. So before this started, I was actually trying to condense it, but it doesn't work so well. So I'll stop when I reach the 15 minutes. And hello, everybody. I'm Rowena. I'm a working artist, a furniture maker, and most importantly, a first-year PhD researcher at the RCA Communication Research. And I come from a design background, studied industrial design both for my bachelor and for my master. My work explores constructed narratives and ideologies embedded in everyday objects, as well as the often invisible industrial systems behind contemporary living experiences. And my research is titled as Miniature World Toys, Storytelling Media, a model for alternative realities. I'm at the very early stage of my research. And last week, I listened to the colleagues' presentation, and I was very inspired. So if you have any thoughts, references, and coming out, any reflections, did I mute myself? Should I mute myself or mute myself?
Mute.
Okay.
So yeah, if the speaker will pick up.
I see.
Of course.
That's awesome. Okay, I'll go straight into my presentation. So to start the research, I first went through a process of narrowing down, of looking for my subject of studying. I started with a framework of play, and I found that though there is no universal definition of play, many scholars have attempted to explain what play is. Its existence is somewhat like that of the sound or of air. It's vague yet essential, and therefore extremely difficult to articulate, whether as a noun as in play, or a verb as in to play, or as an adjective as in being playful. And here I listed some examples of play. For example, play is the foundation of culture from Homo ludens. Play is the mood of being human from play matters. Play is ambivalous. Play is ambiguous from the ambiguity of play. Play is liminal from ritual to theater, the human seriousness of play. So as play takes many different forms, as in warfare, sports, even sexual play. This research project does not attempt to address play in its entirety, but instead focus on the play mediated by objects, physical objects, or more specifically, play of toys. While the definition of play remains elusive, toys offer a tangible point of entry where play is materialized. So as the physical mediator of play, toys are now commonly understood as playthings. The word consists of two parts, which is play and things. But originally going back to its etymology, play it was not a category of objects at all at the very beginning, but instead it was a category of value judgment. It refers to something trivial and frivolous. So only later, by the 17th century, toys became commonly acknowledged as objects associated with childhood. So for defining toys in a contemporary setting, I took the definition by David Hopkins in his book, Dark Toys, in which he said, the toy here is a pre-manufactured object, a plaything given to children by adults rather than the child's own definition, the child's own creation. And I put down one of my favorite quotes related to toys here by William Blake, which is the child's toy and the old man's reason are the fruits of 2 seasons. So we always conceive toys as innocent objects, but is it actually true? So if we look at more explicit forms of ideological formation, for example, the political structure of the Taliban, we can observe the role of religious schools, which is called madrasas, as a key mechanism in shaping ideology through early education. While madrasas operate within the specific national context, toys, for example, like Barbie, are distributed globally, so exerting influence in a more subtle and seemingly unserious way, and are therefore harder to notice. As David Hopkins in the same book indicates, it is worth asking why these objects have been given so little serious attention up to now. The obvious reason is that, by dint of their association with the childish and infantile, they are assumed to fall beneath intellectual scrutiny. So here I want to mention a fun fact. In one of the scientific studies about synesthesia, many American people would associate the letter A with the color red. And one of the theories behind this phenomenon was that it was because in Mattel's classic earlier educational blogs series, A was colored in the color red. And so following this line of logic, I want to introduce this example, which is Auntie Day. And so throughout history, toys have functioned as tools for constructing reality. And Auntie Day was one of the first industrially manufactured plastic dolls produced in Ghana in the 1950s and 1960s, shortly after independence from British colonial rule, which is with its wide westernized appearance, it can be read as an ideological remain of colonial influences embedded within local culture. And here is a picture showing the juxtaposition of local girls interacting with Auntie Day or just living together with Auntie Day. And this connection is also explored in cultural productions. For example, in the film Holy Mountain, which is a surreal and symbolic court film, a toy factory manufactures war toys as a way of conditioning children ideologically in advance of the real conflicts. As the factory owner explains, which is the lady here with the red hairs. They use political data to determine what kinds of toys to produce, shaping children's perception of future enemies from a very early age. In one of the scenes, anticipating a war with Peru in 15 years, the factory studies Peruvian cultures and produces brown-skinned vampire figures that can only be defeated by white soldiers. Alongside this, they launch a comic book campaign, which is called Captain, in which a superhero fights Peruvian monsters, reinforcing the same narrative through another medium, which is magazine. And similarly, in the 1992 film Trust, toys are transformed into weapons and children are recruited to fight in wars under the illusion that they are just simply playing games. So if the previous examples demonstrate how toys can function as ideology production machines, the BBC series, The Miniaturist, approaches it from a different angle. It showcases how toys can also function as ideology reinforcement machines, not only during childhood, but also expand into adulthood. Through the story of Nella, the series depicts the tradition of Dutch doll houses, revealing how miniature domestic spaces mirror the structure of the real or of the actual big home. While men control the actual home, women are confined to managing its miniaturized version, reproducing and maintaining the gender roles within a contained world. What makes this example extra striking is that these historically luxurious Dutch doll houses were wrapped in magnificent packaging, transforming gender roles and social norms into objects of desire. something ordinary people could never attain, they could never afford. Like the gilded bird cage keeps appearing in the series, the dollhouse here also function as a crude machine of aspiration. So the argument here is that toys are not innocent. They are carriers of ideology, our first exposure to the roots of the world, function similarly to mythologies, but in a much more subtle and unserious way. 2 minutes already. Yes. Okay, sorry. So here comes the book Mythologies, which is a very important theoretical support for my thesis, in which the author Roland Barthes critiqued French toys specifically, as one could not find a better illustration of the fact that a dark Frenchman sees the child as another self. All the toys one commonly sees are essentially a microcosm of the dark world. They are all reduced copies of human objects that take the eyes of the public, as if in the eyes of the public, the child was all told nothing but a smaller man.
Finish your thought.
Okay. So here I just wanted to introduce the first part of my practice, which was also the starting point of my research project. I started it when I was in my master, and I started with this manifesto of Know Thyself, from which I was trying to investigate into my body anxiety issue, which is a line-16 issue of myself. And I took a psychoanalytical perspective, so investigating in my childhood toys, which is Barbie. By that time, I was an obsessed Barbie player. And through the investigation, I realized that I was playing with Barbie, but not only Barbie, but at the same time, the objects she obtained, the places she lived in, the social relations she had, and all the love and respect she had because I was convinced because she looked in a certain way. I'll finish the tip of iceberg part if that's all. So I realized that Barbie is just the tip of the iceberg in the storytelling system. So everything else was actually what is beneath the sea level, what was beneath the surface. And deep down, the real engine was a world built upon the consumerist and capitalist ideology. So the process of storytelling resembles much like the formation of myth, as indicated in mythologies or word building. I guess I'll just stop here. And after that, it's more like a detailed introduction of how the storytelling mechanism worked in Barbie, in the whole world of Barbie, and how did I utilize the storytelling mechanism on the Rowena series, which is my bootleg toy series.
Great. Thank you so much. Like we can pick up with some of that in the Q&A as well.
Yeah, sure.
As we, it may have some relevance to the other speakers.
Yeah.
See, there's lots of claps on the screen. Thank you. Yeah, reminds me of my day of my Barbie dolls. That's brilliant. Okay. On to the next speaker, who's on screen. That's Sean. So Sean, if you're ready, please go ahead.
Cool. Can you guys see my screen here?
Yep.
Oh, it's a little bit awkward. You can see all of the tabs.
Yeah, you see it. That's right. Thank you.
Okay. No, sorry. No. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sean, and today I'm going to present my PhD current progress. My project is called Unveiling Chinese Protestants in the Modification to the Current International presentation, and also I have a subtitle, which is a study of communicative strategies, interpretations, and also the display approach in contemporary museums in presenting Chinese porcelains. I want to start with a pretty saturated and concentrated sentence of my abstract here, which kind of reflects to the internal reason of why I'm making this PhD research. Museums are presenting all of the artifacts in a certain way, in their own ways, actually. How curators are interpreted, the same materials can be actually different to different scenarios and also the audience. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. And then I want to start also with the brief content, also a timeline of what I'm including today. The first part is a brief introduction of my background and also why I'm doing this research. Second part is the research overview, which covers the research questions, the remits and scope, and also the methodology and methods. Third part is the main body, which covers the current progress of my research. I will use 3 museums as samples. And also the last part is the future plans and also the upcoming timeline. Moving on to the introduction, I got my BA in Econ and Art in the States and also a master's in Museums and Digital Culture at the Pratt Institute. My early stage of the higher education is pretty much between the cultural disparities and also the identities between the China and the States. And also during those years, the 2 projects, in the internships and also the research, they covers my experience over 20 different art institutions. And also, as for me, myself, I like to visit the museum, and also I got actually 2 of the major concerns out from my visits before, which is the world-renowned museums, they tend to have a drastic difference in presenting physical artifacts, especially towards those cultural artifacts. And also the on-site display of objects is crucial due to the physical presence, but also what if the display is not the best performed or misunderstood at the point and not respectful to the original culture or the historical context in a way. This goes to my research. My research is pretty much covered several cross-cultural aspects and also leading to the research question. The first question is pretty much focused on the visual presentation of the methods and methodologies. These are the first glance that people or the visitors or any kind of audience going to the museum and they can observe. It is not me as a researcher character, but me as a visitor. So as a researcher also, the roles here is to first collect all of the data from the museums, what they already existed in the museums, and then leading to the second phase or second question of my research, which is the strategies and approaches the museums and also the curators employ in order to present at least for the Chinese objects itself. The remits are divided into 3 different categories. So the first one is the capability of presenting. The cross-cultural communication practice is the part that I focused on, which is like I combined with the second point, cultural difference in the interpretation, which means that when the museum is presenting Chinese artifacts, the background stories, the histories, and the related sources, did they mention that? Did they refer to a certain symbol or a pattern? The backstage meaning of that, did they put it there? And also, if it is like a comic book themed porcelain piece, can they just referring to the entire image, or they're referring to just a glance of the image? And also the display, the narratives, the storytelling, and also the exhibition. They forms a visual language in the museum. Going on to the cultural aspects, I first want to research the Chinese culture, but I realize it is too broad and it is incomplete at any point during the PhD period to research. The reason I'm choosing porcelain is it is because it is an icon first. People know China because of China, China is darkly referred to the ceramics, actually porcelains. There's a certain period between 16th and 18th century where there's a word called China mania, which refers to the fever of the aristocracies. They're so favored to this forms of daily use material, and they just shocked at the point. So porcelain actually participated as a part of their lives instead of just like the scrolls, the paintings, or any kind of other sources like the stones just bought from China or got from China. So it's very typical, and actually everyone knows it nowadays about the porcelain piece. Second part is the time period. I dated to Song to Qing dynasty. Song dynasty is the first dynasty that identifies porcelain or identify Jinazhen, which is the third point, Jinazhen as the imperial decree. And Qing dynasty is considered the last period, the last dynasty that is having or making or producing Asian porcelain. The Jinazhen ware is a specific ware that is very famous in China when we're talking about porcelains, and it is because of the kaolin clay. It is only been observed in the whole world that the kaolin clay is only produced in the Jinazhen area. As for the museum aspects, I choose the three museums, the VA, the Met, and the Palace Museum as my case studies, because these three museums, oh Lord, these three museums are not a governmental museums, and it is not national museums also considered. So they have their freedom and also more of a curatorial decision makings, and how they present is not fully controlled by the government or the cultural representation. The number of objects in one research unit, I limited them under 10 objects. I will cover certain case study because it is phenomenal, but not for the full. I try to limit them under 10. And also 5 major parameters, which includes the location and environment, the composition and also structures, the label and wall text, lighting conditions, and the observed problems and outliers. Methodology part, I obtained a mixed method. The quantitative is based on the pilot museum visits. I visit over 15 museums, and also going down from there to the qualitative studies, which I choose 3 museums specifically to do my case studies in 5 different main areas. The data collection, currently I'm still in the empirical analysis phase, but also in the next step, which after the confirmation, I will start to implement my practical practice inside. The current progress, first I'm going through quickly going through the VA. The VA has over 15,000 objects considered Chinese artifacts. And also they have, I choose VA as the case analysis focused on the 3 layers: the object layer, the display layer, and also the accessibility layer. My analysis in this section starts with the overall display strategy and then moves to the individual objects, and finally consider how these objects interact with each other and also the surrounding exhibition environment. This is the first case. For the time consuming, I think I don't have that much time left. I will only go over one specific case, and then I'll show certain pictures instead. This is the main gallery space in the VA. It is called the China Gallery. It's located on the first floor, and on the right picture, it is this is the specific cabinet I choose. it is only presenting Ming Dynasty porcelains. I chose this one as my case study because it is a centrally located, contains a wide variety of iconic porcelain forms, and also it reflects the museum's overall display strategies among this floor. My analysis, not only based on the objects themselves, but also how they interact with the labels, with the lighting, and also the display design, and also the accessibilities to the visitors. From a display perspective, the cabinet is designed mainly for the frontal view. As a result, some objects were decorated fully covering the bodies, narrations, similar to a comic book, or important base marks actually can't be fully appreciated throughout the angle. And also, the lighting and the reflections from the glass are affected by the daylight and also affected the visibility, while the strong background, you can see it is red and sometimes reduces the visual impact of the certain porcelains. Room 136 is the second case. It is located on the 4th floor, which also accompanied to, sorry, to room 137. I'm trying to go quick here. Here's a view, a gentle view, me standing in the front. It is pretty high. They have this fan-shaped, act like a grid. You can see it is not only vertical, but also horizontally dialoguing with each other. It is clearly that the size of the collection is a dialogue here, which can be amplified here even more. Like it is performed like a storage-based display case. Here is the room 137. I have a graph here showing about the room display. I chose the cabinet 11, and you can see in this case on the right, we don't have a lot of, we don't actually see any labels about the entire case, but actually the entire case occupies over 200 different items. This is the last case in the VA. It is located in gallery room 145, and it is a very hidden gem, actually in the entire museum, because it's very hard to find. It is called World Ceramics, which implied that Chinese porcelains are exhibited with other porcelains or ceramics around the world. Moving on to the mat. I don't have that much time. This is a fresh meat because I have just came back from the States between April and May this year. And the first case you are seeing here is the Great Hall areas. We have 6 different galleries around this area. The main gallery I'm talking about is the Benjamin Altman collection on the right. You can see on the map it is right next to the grand staircase. Another very important view on the left is actually going forward to the 204. When you stand at the 202 numbers, you're seeing the entire galleries. All of these galleries are occupied with the wall of porcelain pieces, like the Benjamin Altman collection. Here is the main thing. You can see the dialogue. First, it is breathable. All of the porcelains having gaps in between, and also the color coordination and also dialoguing with each other, making this flow of 2 pattern shape coming from the top to the bottom. The entire Altman collection is distinguished between the decorative porcelains and also the monochrome porcelains, which you can see in this unit. Both of them are presented. The lighting can be...
John, you've got about 1 minute left.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Oh, Lord. I didn't mention these are all in the... a little bit mentioning is that the British Museum is specifically having these exported porcelain all over the galleries, and it is very hard actually to gather all of the information from there. moving on to the Palace Museum, which is, I just bring one sentence. I haven't actually drive into the case study scenarios into the Palace Museum currently. These photos are coming from the pilot museum visit, which is produced last year. You can see some of the patterns are using in order to reflect the front porcelain. And the Palace Museum is using a lot of wall text to indicate the specific pattern. My future plans is to finish the Palace Museum, of course, and analyze how the innovative presenting ways are, and also coming out with my notes and also my designs, and implement my my practice. I'm sorry, my brain is not very much about this one. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. Right. Again, I think there's some things that are beginning to emerge that we can pick up in the Q&A as well. It's some fantastic photographs of the museum interiors. So it was nice just to even flip through those, even though you didn't have a chance to look at those in depth. So thanks for sharing. Okay, so our third speaker of the afternoon, Tess.
Hey, sorry, I'm just working out how to use Zoom.
Okay.
Oh, and I don't turn on my. Sorry, I use the volume.
Yeah, stay mute. Yeah.
The TV has a microphone.
Got it, yeah.
Hit share screen.
Sorry, actually, no, where is share? So there. This. Yeah. It was on preview mode.
No,
Yeah,
right.
it was on there. When you go. Oh, sorry about that. I should say I'm a Teams user. So I'm writing up. So I'm right at the end of my my PhD, and I'm really hijacking this opportunity to test what I'll be doing for my Viva. And I'm hoping that my Viva will just focus on practice, on the proviso that the people examining me have already read my PhD, so I won't sort of forward it with lots of information. However, I'm mindful that most people here don't have a clue what my research is about, so I've sort of adjusted it so there's some information at the start, and then hopefully I won't rush through the end. This is what I'm concerned about, because I'll run out of time. But yeah, it will just be focusing on my practice. So my title is called Syntheses of Time. It's an application of animation practices to wordless picture book making for children. It brings sort of creative methods and technical processes from short experimental narrative animation into dialogue with philosophies of time to develop a durational animation-informed approach to wordless picture book making for children. So my thesis argues that experimental narrative animation offers both a critical lens and transferable methods for shaping the temporal architecture of wordless picture books. I've just been told to slow down a bit. I've been told to slow down, but then also I'll get the 2 minute sign. Juggling the two. Thank you for that. Okay. Well, this is the front and back page cover design for my book. It's called Freight. And it's the wordless picture book that leads this research. It unfolds over 24 hours and is set on a moving train. And the 12 spreads begin and end on a platform, while the 10 interior spreads move through the different train compartments as the same 30 characters travel through the book. So rather than following a single linear plot, the spreads lay a chronological progression with multi-threaded visual logics drawn from animation and process-based systems. Again, I bolted this on as way of an introduction, just to sort of practice-led research, or my approach to practice-led research. So if this project positions sort of making as method rather than the outcome. The wordless picture book functions as a site of inquiry through iterative cycles of making, reflecting, and remaking. Because the research asks how time can be shaped in visual storytelling, I argue methods that unfold through time are methodologically appropriate. The research does not propose a replicable workflow so much as offer a situated account of what I did and why. And it's this reflective record of making, rather than a template to follow, that I believe will serve practitioners, particularly picture book makers, who might usually prioritise text, as well as anyone really interested in the expression of time and space in wordless picture book making. So, animation. While implicit in all visual narrative, the manipulation and control of time is fundamental to animation production. So although assembled frame by frame, the viewer experiences these moving images as synthesis rather than sum. I think this should run. I think I've got some issues with how my animation runs in a PowerPoint. I'm going to address that. It should be smoother than that. It's this tension between material construction and perpetual synthesis that I believe is productive and lies at the heart of this inquiry. The practice translates micro operations of animation, such as timing, gesture, and metamorphosis, into page architecture, but it also considers the macro operations, such as the overall pulse of narrative, the rhythms of repetition, and the quickening of anticipation and release. So I've organised the practice through a set of interconnected stages that move from macro composition to micro operations and back again. Story and structure organise long-range rhythms, sequence focuses on individual threads, character tests how time can be embodied in drawing, in gesture, so a micro operation, and production pulls out and binds these concepts to the material form of the book. So I'm going to start with story and structure. The children's literary scholar, Rosemary Ross Johnson, argues that children's stories exist in the present, but are infused with future, as opposed to adult literature, which turns to the past. To structure chronological linear stories, storytellers tend to work backwards. So retrospective linearity requires the storyteller to travel back into the past to impose order and effect meaning. But I wanted to develop an approach to wordless picture book making that offered an alternative. Not to deny the before and after, the codex enforces succession, but I like to think of succession as a resource rather than a rule. The challenge is to get from A to B without knowledge of where B is, so to travel blindly. So I strung together pieces of a puzzle, so fragments of ideas attached to fragments of stories that align with the Bergsonian, Deleuzian insistence that events form in relations rather than account of instance. And I produced many of these grids. They sort of provided spaces where events might surge. And I also used story mapping. Story mapping rather than script writing is a kind of core method because it discourages chronological plotting. I had a place, a train, a start and finish, and I began to list themes and characters, but I had no story, no arc, and no protagonist to anchor the story to. At this stage, I was reading a lot of philosophy, a lot of philosophy of time, Bergson, Deleuze, Lefebvre, which found its way directly into my practice. So I drew fortune tellers looking into the future and pallbearers, the cycle of death and rebirth. And while I didn't have main characters, I've never had main characters, I was thinking about hierarchies on board, opportunities for characters to move up and down, where their stories progress back and forth as well as across. A rich man gambles away a fortune while buskers are promoted to the stage. And I separated the characters into individual story threads. So this is the sequence section of my practice. And I could manage their progression and control them in isolation. So each character progresses through the book and folds back in different ways and in different speeds. It's a common practice in animation to use cycles or boils to control the progression of different moving assets. So to explain this in more detail, I'll walk through the story threads of 3 different characters quickly. I took the notion of narrative threads literally with this character. She knits, and while the act of knitting is repetitive, her story travels forward. And what I've done is I've kind of isolated her on each page, so you could sort of like a spotlight, so you can see where she is and her individual story. So by the fourth spread, the wall begins to unravel and coil around the other travellers, thus interrupting her loop and entangling her story with others. So at first linear, cyclical, the wall forms a spiral and chaos ensues. Eventually she gets back on track, linearity is restored, and the reader can observe her scarf that she's knitting getting visibly longer. So you can sort of see that from the 8th, 9th towards the end. It sort of marks a visible linear progression. In the last image, she gives the scarf away. The spiral, as demonstrated, the spiral is an unpredictable narrative shape. So at its center, it appears as a cycle, but when it opens, it can break free from repetition and there's an opportunity for change, upwards or downwards. So it can tunnel into an abyss or it can ascend to triumph. This boy gradually masters a yo-yo. At the start, he struggles to control it. And while he struggles, he's trapped and locked into a cycle of frustration and failure. But his story spirals upwards. He breaks free and his skills improve. And if you have a chance, you can sort of see that, his mastery over the course of the story. And then the last one, the Admiral, he's governed by compulsion and his story spirals downwards, demonstrating what Deleuze calls an empty repetition, a mechanical turn that produces nothing. The reader doesn't know his fate, so on each page takes a bet on what might happen. It's not until the 9th panel that we know that he's lost. Isolating these characters on these finished spreads, so marking out the rest of the page, helps reveal my storytelling method, but it also reveals patterning I had not envisaged. Changes in scale and position and emphasis, which I could alter if needed, and we did at times. Character. Animating section of my research or of my practice. So character operates at a micro level, where time is carried by line and repeated gesture. The question was, would subjecting characters to the weight, tension and pressure of time away from the production of the book change their design, progression of their story threads, and how they might inhabit and transform the spaces they occupy on the page? For Dan Torra, they present instances of temporal plasticity, where time becomes malleable material in the hands of the creator. So rather than, these are going to stutter, I think, rather than fixing the character in a gesture of implied movement, these animated loops lock them into actual movement. A cycle can feel stable, even hypnotic, but could also reveal a snag in time. You definitely see a snag in time in these gifts. A character caught in repetition, waiting to be set free. For the viewer, it can create temporal suspense, the probability that the image will return, but the possibility that it might not. Through these loops, I could pause the storytelling, hold the characters momentarily, test different parts, and release them and myself back into the book. Ooh. Okay, production, last one. I've only got 2 minutes, so. Production calls the focus out to the construction and ordering of the picture book pages. And the final illustrations are a product of all these stages. They include illustrations, original illustrations, but also pages from my early grids and story maps, and even frames from the animated sequences, frames from the original sequences. So all sort of surging together. And to explain the final ordering process, I will refer to these 12 story maps, and I'm going to run over them very, very quickly. So they include text, images, instructions. They offer a kind of system of spatial organization. And from this elevated perspective, I could look for these patterns, narrative rhythms, recurring motifs, etc. Each spread is represented. So, for example, the 9th panel takes the train through a tunnel, which you can see actually it's the 10th one on the map that they're like in the final book. And this forces a kind of visual rupture after the climax of a party in the panel before. The tunnel is dark. It's difficult to make out all the threads, though they are all represented. And then the final illustration on the right, you can see this is the only time you see a clock, and it strikes midnight. This map corresponds to the cinema carriage. This was inspired by the Lenin's Soviet propaganda trains. And we can see the characters from the perspective of the screen. Unlike the other spreads, this framing establishes parity. All the passengers are situated on the same visual plane to reinforce a collective engagement in a shared moment. It captures a pause in the action, a moment of cohesion, allowing the reader to recalibrate their attention and briefly take in the ensemble as a whole. And this is a kind of compositional dissection, sort of really reveals the list of all the 30 characters, which are grouped into, is it 12? Wow. And I included Henri Bergson himself as one of the characters. He always appears reading in the top left hand of every page. He's redrawn, but only slightly. So he's a bit like an animated boil, a kind of simulation of life trapped in my story in the top left-hand corner. So moving between the maps, image sequence, and individual character poses, I could toggle between macro and micro. To conclude, my last one. So Freight demonstrates how animation-informed processes can shape the temporal architecture of wordless picture book making. It proposes the wordless picture book as a temporal form, one capable of holding chronology, duration, repetition, and multiple story threads within the stillness of the printed page. Freight becomes less of a story about a train journey than a way of learning how time can travel through still images. Yeah. How much did I go over by?
That's it.
Right, thanks. It's really nice that I know you presented in earlier sessions
Yes.
with this group as well.
Yes.
So just to see again that transformation of your kind of proposition in the early days and now the realized book near completion. Near completion, just fantastic. Thank you. May I suggest we take just a 5-minute break, but in that 5 minutes, if you could go ahead in the chat, whilst you remember the 3 speakers, if you could go ahead and put some questions or comments or themes or things that you want to come back to in the Q&A before we start with the next 2 presenters. That way you don't lose anything in your thinking. And we'll do the same in this space as well. So if you want to take 5 minutes, we'll come back right on the hour then. Right, thank you.
Yeah, I'll try.
It's excellent. The recording goes on, everybody gets quiet.
You'll be trying that.
Horrifying.
Yeah, I think this comes from I just I'm trying to let
No, that's just like great. The other way.
It really is chatty here today. I wish you guys could be with us. It's really buzzy for some reason. It's just, yeah, we're getting towards the end of the last couple of weeks of term. I think everybody's on the real high. Exams are almost over, not quite yet. A few more left. So we're going to continue. We've got 2 more speakers and then a little bit of time for Q&A. And thanks, Steffi. You've already gotten us started with a really good comment and question there. So we're going to go ahead and something a little bit different. Juice is going to go ahead and talk about her research. Over to you, Juice.
Just 1 second. Can you guys all hear me clearly? I'm not sure. Can you guys all hear me clearly? I'm trying. I'm hearing
It's John and Victoria. I can see on the screen. So
just a bit introduction of me. I just joined this PhD this January, so I think my research is quite clear enough of what the outcome would be, but I was still kind of fiddling around with my supervisors with a little bit things. So, but anyway, I think we are embracing each other with sound. So instead of introducing all my research, I will just focus on maybe 1 or 2 things, dig into more specifically. So my research area is on the world building method, 5 element-based dramaturgy, audio-led theater, and audible cinematography. So that's a bit about myself. So I'm doing my PhD as long as I'm a freelance composer. I'm also work in a lot of jobs. So I'm kind of work and research at the same time. So my life has been quite chaotic. I'm curating a theatre festival in this September in Hoxton Hall. So if anyone is interested in theatre, sound, and immersive arts, then give me a shout. So my past sort of portfolio is really about how sound can be a dramaturgical and compositional tool in my theatre. Also, I do a lot of like puppet theatre, dance theatre, also like immersive theatre things with not just one stage, also 2 stage, 4 stages. And I'm really interested in how sonic theatre can form like the circulation and how we as audience we can perform as a collective with the performers together. So this is just kind of interesting listening practice, like what is already performing in the space, in what direction they are far, noise or melody, natural, artificial, what texture, how are you feeling at the moment, what does it remind you of? And I think when I each time thinking of these kind of sentences, it makes sort of like a little method of how I can create sort of like a sonic piece. I think sound is not only an effect, atmosphere or background. Sound can behave as architecture, memory, body, object, rhythm, relation, and dramaturgy. So why is sound? I think the most inspiring quote from myself is this one: to compensate for the limitations of sight, where sight cannot reach, sight cannot act on what it sees. If the gaze cannot alert the distant body on which it recepts, the voice can touch literally at a distance. So that's kind of like my initial kind of sonic theatre diagram of what kind of like the pre-existing sonic theatre in sort of in the contemporary and in the contemporary world. And my research intention is kind of like investigating how 5 elements can inform the creation of sonic theatre using like the self-created methodology called sonic world building by uniting the political dynamics such as the generative and destructive circle of 5 elements with compositional and dramaturgical architecture through the liveness of performance. My research connects sound art with contemporary theatre and takes audio performances from representation to transformation. The research enables sound and theatre practitioners to activate the imagination and shift focus away from the visual, but we are also embracing the visual as well. So that's kind of like a brief kind of introduction, and I would really encourage you to listen to this piece. And this is kind of my first initial sort of composition of how can the 5 elements to be like as a composition as well as a dramaturgical tool in my sonic theatre. So how are we gonna do this?
Share your computer sound.
I could put this link in the chat so people maybe can listen to it, and how would that work? First,
You can I'm gonna help you put it through the computer.
oh, okay.
So it makes it a bit easier to.
Because I think, yeah, I think if I'm not playing, then this presentation just kind of doesn't really make sense. I think sound is by listening and how we enjoy the moment together at present.
For fingers, that's fine. Okay, so I'll do just. Is it playing? Oh, hold on.
Okay, I'm sorry. Do I need to turn all the shit in order for people to hear me speaking? Do I?
No.
I can just stop like that.
You should be good, yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure how the sound is like sounding on your end, but it's very quiet here, but I think it kind of forms a different atmosphere. And I think my way of whatever the composition or dramaturgical process is always like to embrace the present and encourage the improvisation, and it's kind of that. And I'm trying to share my screen just again. Yeah, so that was kind of piece called Cosmology in Recognition, about the 5 elements and how sound is really working in that thing. And it's kind of like a opera piece we are going to exploring, and I'm going to showcase the first sort of opera next Tuesday. And my context is really about the 5 elements, which is a traditional Chinese kind of conceptual game, and how they are kind of moving to a generative circle and a destructive cycle. And why like encourage you to listen to the piece I wrote just now is because that one kind of is playing from water and then going to the fire and then to the earth and then the matter and then the wood. That was my idea of how 5 elements sound like. And then my research background is sort of like the relationship between sound and theater, how it historically, where the sound positions and how the contemporary people are really put sound into. And this is one of like the contemporary sonic theater I was really inspired by it. And I talked to the director about how he's using sound to make a sonic theater piece. And then my practice is more about how sonic theater is on 5 elements, and then how I'm creating this sort of like diagram sonic building method. And I just quickly went into it. And I think one of the last sort of the idea I would like to share to everyone is to really embrace, to improvise, to play whatever you want to play. And you don't need to be a musician, or you can just be someone who likes to make some noise. And how we really kind of embrace the sound together as a whole is really makes the world processing. So that's kind of it. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. I think there's going to be questions around world building as well. Good thoughts. Right. Next, Archana.
Right. Hi everyone. My name is Archana, first year PhD. Hoping to become a researcher next year. Much like Jules, I'm going to be talking mainly about one of my 4 practice studies here today. My research basically is looking at the intersection of AI and artistic practice, and trying to understand what and how artistic practice can do in the face of developing AI infrastructure. How can we make it more inclusive? How can we make it more participatory? And how can we ensure that cultural knowledge is transmitted, cultural memory is transmitted safely, ethically into our future. With birds, this is a practice project I'm doing in collaboration with Professor James Coop here at the RCA. And we're very interested in understanding how, this statement, how does creative practice distinguish AI-mediated selection from active cultural agency? To take that statement apart, I guess we would have to think about what is agency and what is this AI-mediated passive selection? Currently, when we look at things like ChatGPT and all of that, we're looking at choices being offered up to us, a black box technology. We don't know how these decisions are being made. We're not really, this kind of agency of curation of decision is being taken away from our hands. And it bothers me a lot. And so I thought, why not do some research around how to respond to that? With birds, James and I are looking at colonial bias. One of the core aspects, disturbing aspects of AI trained data is really just how systemic bias has been embedded into these LLMs, right? And we're looking at how can we make that visible? What is the grammar of colonial bias that is already present in AI systems today, and can we bring that out? Can we tease that out? And what are the mechanisms we can do that with, especially through artistic practice? So we're looking at W.T. Green's canonical field guide. It's basically a study of birds. It's kind of an interesting a device, I would say, of naming, ordering, displaying kind of nature of birds, very innocuous, but actually it kind of really establishes kind of power hierarchies in a very, very clear way. You get to classify, you get to decide, you get to observe, you get to name, you get to own. And this is pretty much what happened in the late 1800s and then has become kind of an accepted system of classification that's now replicated and entrenched in AI systems. So here's what we did. We took W.T. Green's field guide. We fine-tuned a model, LLM model on it. And then we cross-cut that with Jane Eyre, Bronte's work, again, a very colonial piece of literature. What happens when you take this piece of literature and this kind of classificatory system and bring them together in AI, which is already incredibly biased? And we're trying to tease out what that looks like visually in these kind of mutant, fantastical, synthetic birds. And then we're trying to place that as perhaps a new version of a field guide of synthetic, fantastical birds that are created by these cross-cuttings of literature and W.T. Green's own canonical work. And here, this example is a good one to give you a sense of what we're able to generate from this system. And then we thought, why not add another piece of literature into that training? And so here we look at Reese and the Wild Sargasso Sea, and we take that entire piece of literature and then kind of layer that onto Jane Eyre and then re-represent that. While we were doing this, we started to wonder about how can we visualize and verbalize the deviance from that core piece of colonial classification system to where these pieces of literature might take us. How can we show that deviance? Can we create a deviance index? Can we tease this machine to give us that deviance index? And what happens to those visual representations of the birds? What is that a bird anymore? So you can see with this one, there's just the illustration itself is giving you a sense of something or something not quite all right. And that's great. It's beginning to make you feel a little bit more uncomfortable. We started to think of deviance indexes as a method itself. Can we devise this method using the very systems that are usually hiding these kinds of deviances? Can we capture that, and can that be represented into the text? So this is again another generation. It's another output, and then from that can we devise a lexicon, an alphabet perhaps of bias that the machine itself is generating based on this kind of comparative and accumulative of these pieces of literature. So what do we get as an arts project? We're looking at a pipeline that mirrors perhaps the colonial process of like ownership and ownership making. You're taking an illustrated field guide, you're creating, and through kind of this colonial process of observation, classification, display, right? So we're trying to replicate that in the pipeline itself. So you have your illustrated field guide, the page from that, now made into a realistic bird inside a vitrine, and then animated. Let's see if I can show you an animation. Perhaps not. There we go. Let me get it down the screen. And so you'll see that this bird now starts movement. There's extra limbs. There's some weirdness again with that. Okay, coming back to this. So we have also now created an animated creature that can be displayed in these vitrines. The workflow. So while we were developing this, we were also creating a technical pipeline, an AI pipeline that orchestrates various kinds of AI LLMs, visual, sound, text, and then you can see through this example here, this is what the pipeline looks now. Now, in one step, we can have all these three throughput. You can show a piece of literature, a book, perhaps a book cover. It will grab that information, pull out that a book from its reserves or libraries, and then turn that into a page, one page in the field guide of this kind of fantastical bird. Convert that illustration into a photorealistic image, and then convert the photorealistic image into an animated one that is captured within a vitrine. And actually, why is that important? And I think that when we create pipelines like this, I'm the co-founder of GUI.ai, so I come with a lot of technology practice and looking at how art and technology come together and to address societal issues, and this being a big one. For the arts and humanities, I think these pipelines are now open sourced. Anyone can use them, and then kind of also explore further this critical process of looking at AI from under the hood. What are next steps? We're looking at working with librarians currently, and that's part of the inclusive process. What happens when you look at librarians who are typically custodians of knowledge, right? Can we look at librarians now as perhaps facilitators or bridges between their own local communities and this world of AI? Data set creation, and then making stories from that. And there's a lot to unpack here. What are the governance processes? What are the ethics? What does library as additional technical infrastructure look like? Can visitors become co-designers? There are all of these things that we can unpack. And I think that's really, really where the heart of some of this practice study lies. And so just to say that through this process, the idea in the end would be to, at this point, of course, it's a work in progress, but at this point, we're saying we create this field guide, a page. We're looking at how, say, a Bronte or a Rees or other literature pieces come together and kind of overlay on top of what's already used as training data in a dissolution process. Can these AI generated birds show erosion through these kinds of colonial, industrial, algorithmic processes and the kind of homogenization they create? Think IKEA. And then what is that new renewal process that we can push for? And so the question that comes up is, if the bird is kept now in this vitrine or as a printed page, who is it kept by? Who is it kept for? Who created it? Who is the custodian? And how would it be reinterpreted? And I guess that is, where are we in terms of time? We're good? We're good? Okay, this is the last one. There's some exploration that will go further in terms of looking at what I just showed you was really exploring just LLMs and different models, sound and visual models, and building that. But now we'll extrapolate that into latent space and then that deviance index I talked about in the beginning. How can we visualize a space like that, and can that become a contact zone? For practitioners like myself and many here, can that become a virtual space where these kinds of epistemologies can interact, cross-cut, but still retain their uniqueness versus become one big, bowl of slop, which is what we have today. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you so much. And maybe unshare your screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, may I suggest we just take 2 minutes to digest these last 2 presentations. And again, if you could put comments in the chat, or write them down, or be ready to kind of bring them forward. We'll start the Q&A just in 2 minutes, just give you enough time to kind of think through and come up with some questions. Great. I want to thank all 5 of our speakers for some really interesting presentations and worldviews and practices. So we've moved from Barbies to porcelain to time to elements to birds. That's my executive summary there. So I open the floor to questions and conversation. And we could go to Steffi's question, which is to Sean. Have you had a chance to read it, Sean?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I think she has several points pointing out, which is very good for me. First, she mentioned is the formulation necessarily wrong in the non-national context. I think that is, in my opinion, that is pretty right, especially towards different audience when we're speaking about the question. Like during my process of digesting this project, there's never a vast universal way of presenting artifacts or any kind of object. It is always about the people or the purpose that we're interpreting at the audience. Like the museums are exhibiting them for a reason, and that is the purpose why people are pursuing to these audiences. So it can never be universal. And it's also, I think she specifically mentioned that if treating the porcelain as a category, I think that is a museum's decision. Basically, throughout the 17 museums I have encountered, I can only thinking about the VA, the Fitzwilliams, and also the Jinnazhen China Ceramic Museum. These are the three museums that is treating porcelain specifically as a category. Despite these three, others are pretty much treating them as a part, or at least like a documentation of a certain period of time. It is the history that is reading out. As she mentioned, how what is a good way maybe for me to thinking about presenting them, the nuance of the space. I would say it is still very corresponded to the museum collection. That is a must, because as a Chinese, and I actually really want to say this because I don't have like a positive or a very bragging about how Chinese museum are presenting them better than the European, because we don't have that much actually exported porcelain. Some of them, even for the Chinese government or for the Chinese environment, they have to nowadays doing auctions to bid and then to get them from the international auctions in order to get them, like for instance, one sink boat, when they get it out, all the process then do that. Also, that is the same scenario for the current Chinese museums. They don't have a huge collection of exported porcelain, which is actually a benefit for the European or the Western museums. I hope the answer partially answered the question.
Great, thanks, Sean. Steffi, are you okay with that? Any follow-ups?
Teal, I think Steffi may be just out of the call right now, but she's going to rejoin.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll go down. There's a couple more questions in relationship to both Eric and Judith. We're vying for the same question test for you.
Video, but not my sound. Is that right?
Yeah.
I do address this in quite a lot of depth in my thesis. So the short answer is short answer is no. I'm not placing it on children. And I'm not placing it on children because that's not my research. So my research is not participatory. I'm trying to test specific sort of narrative aims and objectives. They work with it. I'm testing them within a specific context. Other people can then take my work and test it on children and evaluate whether or not they think just evaluate those responses. And a researcher that might do that would be a researcher that's experienced of working with children. I am not experienced at working with children. I don't even like my own children. I'm in absolutely no position to comment about whether a child, or I wouldn't know. I'm not qualified to evaluate a child's response to any text. That aside, I do have personal, and I would never mention this in my thesis, but I do have issue with researchers who do test on children. I think it's very problematic. It can often be a case of the kind of text that's often chosen can be quite, no one's choosing the bottom of the barrel kind of Sainsbury's picture books that are in the kind of buy 2 for 1. No one's testing those texts on children, so it's usually really well respected and complex text, and you never test that kind of text on a group of children if they don't respond positively. No researcher is going to say, well, I showed all these kids these books and they didn't respond at all and they completely ignored it and they're all morons. No one's ever going to do that, but that might often be the case. So I think how you evaluate a child's response to particular texts is ethically very, very, very problematic. hence me not being qualified at all to do it, and I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. But I think it's fantastic that other people do. That's my official line.
And I have to say, Tess has held this line since day one.
No, I haven't. I didn't.
We had a conversation.
We had a conversation, and I realised pretty early on that Teal was right. But I think I tried at the start. I think I toyed with the idea. I think I toyed with the idea because for the same reason, I think there was an expectation. For the same reason you've asked those questions. If I'm making picture books for children, then surely I should test them on children. I mean, it's a completely worthy question. It's very, I probably need to have a much better rehearsed answer to that for the day. But as I said, I do address it in the writing.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to stay with you just for a second because Judith had a question as well. Do you want to say it, Judith?
Yes, I wanted to say, first of all, having heard your two other presentations, it's been really interesting to see how it evolved. And I was waiting for the egg, the flipping, what I think is an egg. I don't think it is quite, but the flipping at the end of the character flipping seems to be flipping a pancake or an egg or something.
You change the fish.
Is it fish now?
It's the fish, yeah. Okay. In the context, it's the fish. You flip fish.
Well,
but there is flipping.
Yeah, indeed, because I remembered that. So I just wondered why 30 characters.
That was.
Was it a decision from the outset?
No. I knew I wanted many. I knew I didn't want main characters. I knew I wanted passengers, and I didn't want any one specific character to dominate in any way. So I wanted sort of parity across all the passengers. I think I got to 30 and thought I can't squeeze any more in. There wasn't a plan in that respect. And it's not 30 different stories because some of them are groups of characters. So for some characters, it's just one character and we follow their story. And then there's a group of 4. That's the largest group. But there are quite a few pairs as well. Okay. So it's 30 characters, but not 30 stories. I think it was 18 stories. I should know this. It's about 18 stories.
That's fascinating. Thank you. I'd like to ask about the cinema as well, but I don't want to hog the time of the cinema page. But I think perhaps move on to the next question.
Let's do that. Did you want to?
Is there a reason you didn't go for 12 to match?
It really wasn't. It wasn't planned in that way. There was no kind of aim of a specific number. It was how many can I accommodate before it becomes a complete mess. I think I got.
So, I guess paralleling the 12 panels and the 12 stories.
Yeah, I think it's 12 frames a second. I think there was an element of that, but also it works within the physical book.
Right.
12 words. They're 12 spreads, so they there's a gutter in the middle of each illustration. Yeah. So 24 pages.
Sure. Yeah.
So which I suppose 24 frames a second. There might, to be honest with you, that's ringing bells now. That might have been a reason. But in terms of accommodating the character, it was really just I lost characters and gained characters. Sure. It was more about what stories were working, what weren't. So I took certain threads out because they just weren't working, or they didn't have they didn't tie back to a theory. I was quite careful about that. There had to be each of the threads, and I needed to be able to tie back to the theory. Right. And needed to be triggered, influenced by, or emerged from the reading. So I could tie everything back to the theory. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to go on and back up a little bit. Eric, you had a question for Juice?
Yeah, it was just. I mean, I found the piece that I listened to absolutely mesmerizing and extraordinary, and I was just wondering whether, as part of your conceptualization, you have a kind of in your head an a priori image of a physical environment. You're talking about a sort of world making, and I wonder to what degree that goes beyond the sonic and becomes a kind of imagined, as it were, physical or visual setting?
So at the earlier process of like the composition process, we sort of like, can you hear me? Okay. We kind of like did like a devising process with the performers with absolutely different nationality. We've got someone from Indian, we also got someone from Spain and British. Like they have no physical idea, they have no mental ideas of what the 5 elements are, and we really trying to embrace the environment of how we explore these five elements and how the generative process of the 5 elements and the destructive elements work. So we did a lot of improvisations. We encourage people to think a lot, and we encourage people to bring their own nationality background to the sonic elements, and then we make world building diagrams on behalf of it. And after this, we made like a sort of sonic opera piece, and this will be performed next Tuesday, and we will be then gathering audience feedback after that. And then after that, I am sort of intend to do a workshop with solo theater and sound practitioner to share about how they feel about 5 elements, and then how they're going to use sound to perform to each other. And also with the song I just performed in the presentation, that one I also made the ambisonic version of that, which was using about like 11 speakers, and then to really encourage the sound to move around. And I hope that sort of get your answer.
Thank you very much, and congratulations.
And James, you wanted to follow up from Steffi's question for Sean.
I do, but I think Min was before me, Teal.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
it.
You have a comment again, coming back to Tess.
All right. Can anyone hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to say a comment to Tess. Her design really impressed me because it reminds me of the picture the picture books and the maze that have experienced in some video games. And also it reminds me of the metaphor of Ariadne's thread, because the characters are not growing up as a kind of a linear beam, but they are existing as a kind of trace. So that's very interesting for me, because I have been considering about humans or existence as, or subjection as a kind of trace instead of a thing, a complete thing. Yeah, that's what I am also doing in my own project. Yeah, just want to say something about her design. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I've got an Ariadne thread quote in my so yeah.
Great, thank you. James, come back to you now.
Okay, thank you. Well, I mean, in fact, maybe Steffi should come before me, because I think you were out when Sean was answering your question, Steffi. No. Okay.
I mean,
Well,
I think I really apologise that just a call came through and I had to take it, so I didn't hear your response, Sean. I'm sure it was great, but I didn't hear it.
No,
so it's probably better, James, if you speak, because you did hear it.
Yes, totally fine. I can just reiterate it again. Yes, going to for the first one, you mentioned, is it necessarily wrong in the non-national context? I think it's always about who you are presenting for and the purpose, how people are using the presentation for. And that is actually drastically different for the Chinese viewers and also for the Western viewers. You are bringing the different knowledge to the museum, and all of the stuff that you can digest and also process and also get recall back to a certain knowledge is totally different. And also to the cinema mon you mentioned, and also another example, I haven't mentioned that yet, but it is a very good one, since like you mentioned, the map and also the contour of the entire China back in days. It is not called China back in days, but it is all about how the museum their own collections are performed in the way, like you mentioned, like how I treat the museum's Chinese collection as a collection. And my answer to that is I believe it is related to how much or how large the sample size the museum is collected, and also that influenced how they can interpret it and also how they can curate the show. You mentioned the peep show, and I haven't heard it before, but I just took a glance actually in between, and I think it is a good way. But also in my presentation, I forget to mention one thing is that I only focus on the permanent exhibitions and also regarding the permanent collection, which it is a good way of presenting them in the temporary exhibition, because the motion and also the engagement that requires all of the audience to participate is already narrate something, but it is not applicable adaptively to the permanent collection, as they function more as how the museum is collecting and they're hosting these kind of 1, 2, 3 stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much for reiterating. I'll hand back to James.
Well, it was just this question about, this idea of the sort of cinema, world cinema, and questions about culture and working across cultures. I mean, one of your expressions, Sean, was cross-cultural, and I noticed that I mean, all of you, well, pretty much all of you were working across cultures, different forms of text formats across culture, with Rowena also talking at the beginning about, Victor Turner anthropology. I mean, that set the tone for me about working through culture and thinking about culture. And that works with Juice's music, which is sort of merging and playing with different cultural traditions in music. Works with relationality that Tess was talking about, relation to Deleuze. And it made me sort of wonder then, when one gets to AI, what happens then? I mean, what struck me listening to Archana's fantastic presentation was actually culture wasn't at all a question. I mean, there were all sorts of questions about appropriation, about agency, about AI as colonizing, in fact, ironically, colonial archives, in this case of sort of, original drawings colonizing nature with birds. But in fact, in the questions that Archana was asking at the end about AI and birds, it was when, it was what, but it wasn't where. The question of location wasn't sounded at that point. And I'm just wondering to myself, and this is what I was trying to ask, and perhaps it's a question for everyone, I mean, for all of us, rather than specifically to Sean via Steffi, simply that when one gets to AI and gets into the whole ethics of AI and what AI is doing and how we are engaging with it and participating and always aware clearly of methodology here, what are the risks in going into AI territory? Interestingly, then, for me, it seems that those questions that we've agonized over, in particular in cinema, I mean, we've used the term transcultural to try and deal with some of our kind of, frustrations. We're talking about world cinema. It kind of indicates something that is about transformation, but it's also contestation. It's about, it's about asking and interrogating what culture is in cinema and national cinemas, international cinemas. But transcultural seems to be still the flavor of the day to kind of, as a starting point. And it just made me think, is AI going to put those questions to one side? Is AI inviting us almost? And is there a risk of saying, in fact, that there are so many other important questions about AI that are being raised, which are crucial, urgent, and are taxing all of us in society right now, that the questions that have bedeviled theory for so long, post-Barthes and post-structuralism, all about location, post-colonial in particular, are those questions going to be rendered obsolete or at least irrelevant or marginalized and sort of, made to feel as though they're not where we should be working right now? Sorry, that's a big question, and I haven't got an answer to it. But it's the quality of the presentations that made me think, in fact, for the first time, what is AI asking of us as a practice in terms of methodology? You know, what is it that we are? I mean, this is obviously what Archana was trying to get to, and I think it's so important. What is it that we're not going to be actually addressing because AI is asking so many other crucial questions? So it's a question. It's a question.
All right. It's questions that can't fully be answered, but let me take a stab at some of it. Location, when it comes to culture, this is interesting, especially when you think of it from a colonial, decolonial, gosh, all of those colonials perspective. What happens to archives, for example? We have museums. Sean's gone deep down one path there. These museum collections right here in UK hold objects from cultures from across the world. These are physical artifacts. Now, there is an opportunity here to think about where do data sets sit that represent culture? How is culture represented? How is it transferred or transmitted? What is cultural memory, and what is allowed to stay and what is let to be forgotten? And I think these are all questions very much upon us. And as people in the cultural sector, very much our responsibility. So I'll bring up the idea of sovereign data, sovereign inference. That is a big aspect of what we have to think about. Where does data reside? Where do inferences meaning when we ask AI a question, there is some kind of computing that happens that hits up a data center somewhere. Where do those questions and where do those responses reside? Should it go to places like the US, which are currently so unstable politically? Should they stay within our territory? And then as we think about museums and higher education and research centers, should they in fact stay within the walls of that? Great. Problem being that research is never advanced by being siloed like this, right? So we want to be able to create infrastructure and systems that continue to allow us to explore, interrogate, cross-cut cultures, knowledge systems, all of that. And again, it comes back to the potential that we can, for once, look at cultures from far and near. We can look at languages from far and near, sounds from far and near. The big problematic that I feel is very much playing out right now is a homogenization of when these cultures or epistemologies or knowledge systems are brought in without any guardrails into this kind of data training space and then kind of get mixed like plasticine with kids, just mixed into one big shade of gray. So how can we keep these systems true and authentic to their own forms, to their own processes, to perhaps their own worldviews, and yet be able to cross-cut, explore, experiment, play with. And that, I think, is where a lot of my question and research sits. It's really about that. With birds, it's looking at one form, kind of the lowest hanging fruit, as it were, James. It's what is easily available, what is easy to play with. The infrastructure and systems we want to build and we're building now is in the making, and it is exciting. And it is certainly inclusive and it is certainly participatory because we must have that. We must have that from every corner and from every place. I don't know if that answers your very big question with a very big question, but that's really where some of this goes. The coming together and collectivizing is critical, but at the same time, the being able to have a differentiation between these epistemologies is also important. Sorry, I'm fading. I'm hearing my own voice and fading, so I should stop.
Well, if I could just say, I mean, I think you articulate very clearly the challenges and the multiple sites of resistance that we're going to have to establish, you know, across the board here. And it wasn't, as you know, I wasn't suggesting that you were deficient at all by not saying where is the bird at the end, but simply that there are these sort of factors that are becoming sort of, you know, so central and foregrounded. But clearly location and where one is when one speaks and articulates and critiques, they're not going to go, but they're going to have to be posed in different ways, it seems to me. They're going to have to be much more sophisticated, theoretically. I mean, this is a chance, I think, for theory to move to a new gear. This is what perhaps I'm trying to tell myself.
Absolutely, and also posed by different people, different types of people from different parts of the world. I feel like we're all kind of forced to think in certain ways and just certain models. What about others? And do they exist? Other models of thinking and researching and inquiry? And I feel like practice-led research is a fantastic example of that, isn't it? Like everyone at this table has such a different perspective, different methodologies, different ways of approaching these kinds of critical questions. So I mean, I'm very ideological, even activist about it, that artistic practice has to lead this next wave, and it has to do that yesterday. So yeah, I think that's my stance.
Thank you very much. I'm very much aware of the time. Even you said you were fading. So much to think about and digest, and I hope these conversations continue between individual researchers, or perhaps again next year, James, if we can get things together, we can continue and see how people have developed their research as well. I just wanted to end by thanking Judith for kickstarting this all those years ago. It's been very good, and I think year by year, seeing Tess and others develop in their research has been fantastic. And that ability just to be able to talk across different disciplines by sharing an understanding through the presentations in terms of how we might think about our own research and how we share and disseminate that more widely. So thanks to everybody. Thanks to our presenters today. Really good job. Really appreciate it. Round of applause for everyone.
And Teal, can I just in turn thank you for, you know, you've done a marathon, 2 sessions in a week, which have been fantastic. And hopefully we can carry on now. We set a precedent for 2 sessions, and hopefully next time it'll be a bit more equal. That's just how it worked out this time. But I mean, it was a wonderful series, and I just want to thank you for putting it together your end with your team and making it such a pleasure. Truly.
Right. Thanks, James. It's been great working with you and your colleagues on this as well. And again, congratulations to Gareth. I got to, you know, you've been on this journey with us as Tess has. So thanks so much. And Victoria, good that you were able to join this time. So we hope we see more of you as well as the year goes on. So I'll leave it at that. Everybody have a great evening, depending on where you are. And I'm sure there'll be more conversations to be had in due course. So thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
It was last week.